and welcome back to my channel, where I talk about retro pop culture and other oddities. Weird Al has kind of become the patron saint of this channel, and it is long past time I made another video discussing something of his. So today we are really going back to our roots by discussing something oddly similar to the subject I discussed in my very first video. Broadcasting history and authenticity in entertainment, but Weird Al flavored. That's because we're talking about UHF. I love this movie. If that wasn't made clear by the poster behind me, I have two more in the same room. In my defense, I bought this poster before I got the 35th anniversary edition of the DVD that had like all the extra stuff in it, so I have a fair reason for having the same poster twice. I don't have a fair reason for making a video this long talking about it, except that it's Weird Al and this is just my brand now, I guess. I also want to say that I watched this movie an unhealthy amount of times for the purposes of making this video. I watched it and wrote down all my initial thoughts and ideas. Then I watched it again with the commentary track and took notes on that. Then I watched it again so I could do like my commentary on the plot. And then while I was editing, I had to watch all the little bits and pieces that my editing program chopped it into. So I've seen it probably 4 more times on top of that. And I'm not complaining. Like I said, I love this movie, but it does kind of make your brain a little bit loopy after a while. Honestly, I wasn't really sure what angle to approach this video from. It's kind of like my Electric 6 video where I just throw a whole bunch of stuff at you and see what happens. So we're going to talk about the production history, how cute Al is in this movie, the cultural impact, or lack of, how cute Al is in this movie, why I think this movie is brilliant, and maybe, if you're lucky, how cute Al is in this movie. We're also going to pull a classic video essayist move and try to wring some deep philosophical truth out of the mop that is this film. Will we succeed, or will we just be left with a bucket of dirty mop water? Don't touch that dial. It's going to be a wild ride. We're going to get into it very shortly, but first, a word from today's sponsor. Gee, I just don't know what to wear. All my shirts are so boring. They don't reference any of my favorite fandoms. And they're certainly not designed by a college student with a small YouTube channel. Oh, my life sucks. Well, it doesn't have to suck anymore. Hi, I'm Abby, the person whose video you're watching right now. And I'm also today's sponsor. I don't just make radical YouTube videos. I also make t-shirts for fans of radical things on my Etsy shop, RadFox Art. Whoa! Do you have a shirt for my favorite political saga about feral cats and their overly complicated land disputes? I sure do! Radical! Now I'll be the most popular person at the fan meetup, geared towards ages 8 to 12. If you like the shirt I'm wearing in this video, you can get it in several different colors from my Etsy store.
Did your background just change?
No, it did not. You can also find other things, like these copy pasta tote bags. And that's not all. I also have a TeePublic, where you can find mugs, hats, stickers, and more. Radical! Can I get a Crazy Bus Live Tour commemorative mug? Or a sweatshirt that says, I love someone neurotypical? You sure can. Just remember that Etsy sales let me keep more of the money than TeePublic sales do, and the shirts are the same price either way, so if you want to buy a shirt, be a dear and buy it from Etsy. Should you really be making demands on your potential customers? Well, you see, infomercial me, because I'm my own sponsor and therefore not likely to pull my sponsorship for a bad ad read, I can pretty much do whatever I want. Radical! Thank you so much to me for sponsoring today's video, and thank you for watching. Now let's talk about spatulas, local analog programming, and the deep philosophical truths inherent in lowbrow entertainment. Set loose upon the world in July of 1989, UHF is a weird movie, in more ways than one. The idea for the film first came about in 1985, following the success of the albums In 3D and Dare to Be Stupid. At this point in Al's career, he'd already made a name for himself in the realm of spoof video comedy. The music video for Eat It won the American Video Awards 1984 award for Best Male Performance, and his other music videos received significant airtime on MTV. So it was only a matter of time before he got the idea to make a movie. Working with his longtime manager and friend Jay Levy, they came up with the initial idea for UHF, which was a little looser and more conceptual than the final product. According to Al, it was heavily inspired by the 1980 film Airplane, a farcical spoof film that's really just a mix of loosely connected comedic sketches barely tied together with a piece of dental floss for a plot. That's not me insulting Airplane. I love that movie and I think we don't appreciate it enough. But it gives you a good idea of what the original framework for UHF was supposed to be. Not so much a movie with a strong plot or characters, but just a vessel for Al to be as wacky and weird as he wanted to be, but with the runtime and reach of a theatrical film. But because Al is incapable of doing anything less than his absolute best, they went with a more story-based approach. Well, kind of. We'll get to the plot here in a little bit after we're done with the boring history part. The script was pitched to a number of production companies until, after 3 years, it was picked up by Cinecore, a production company run by Gene Kirkwood and John W. Hyde. Neither Kirkwood nor Hyde had a lot of experience producing comedy films, so with this being a new venture for them, they were very hands-off throughout most of the production process and just let Al and Levy do their thing without a whole lot of hand-holding. If you've seen my video on the Weird Al show, you understand why this is hilariously bittersweet. Cinecore worked with the distribution company Orion Pictures to set an astronomical budget of $5 million, which, according to Wikipedia, is roughly equivalent to about $13 million today. So this was not a high-budget film by any means. And with Jay Levy at the helm in his film directorial debut, production on UHF began in earnest in summer 1988. Levy had directed almost all of Al's music videos at that time, so he was the obvious candidate for director, even though he had never directed an actual film before. And he brought the same spirit to the movie that he did to the music videos, and we love him for that. Filming primarily took place in or near Tulsa, Oklahoma. They wanted to utilize as much local talent as possible, so a lot of the ensemble roles and extras were natives of the Tulsa and Dallas areas. For those of you outside of the southwestern US, it probably sounds weird to call a Texas city local to Oklahoma, but they're actually very close to each other. There are several reasons I'm upset I wasn't the age I am now in 1988. One of them is a lack of inflation, another one is easy access to 80s fashion and homewares, and the other one is that I could have been an extra in UHF. Anyway, UHF had an especially great cast for a spoof comedy film, and when I say a great cast, I don't mean big names or awards show regulars. I mean people who can really carry a farcical comedy like this and understand what it requires. What's interesting about this cast is that Al actually plays the straight man in this movie. Or at least he's supposed to. George Newman, who is named after the iconic Mad magazine mascot Alfred E. Newman, is supposed to be the most normal guy in the film next to his friend Bob. But because he's played by Weird Al, that's not exactly the case. I mean, I get that he has to be the main character, but you can't really cast a guy called Weird Al as the straight man in a movie and expect it to stick. But what I'm saying is that when you put him next to the rest of the characters in this movie, George is really not that wacky. The rest of the cast is filled with all kinds of colorful comedic characters played by people who know comedy, and it carries this film. People don't often realize just how much power a casting director has over the outcome of a film. And I think the casting director for UHF, Kathy Henderson, deserves so much credit for the perfection of this ensemble of character actors. Michael Richards, aka Cosmo Kramer from Seinfeld, plays Stanley Spadowski, and he does so brilliantly. He actually turned down the role initially, despite it being written with him in mind, although there's some confusion about what really happened there, like we don't know if the agent turned it down, or if he turned it down, or there seems to have been some miscommunication there. Because when he finally did come in to audition for it, he came in character, complete with the false teeth that we see him wear throughout the film, and he spent the entire audition process just raving about cleaning supplies. Richard's physical comedy is second to none in this film. It's a masterclass in slapstick and living caricature and a joy to watch. Also, he was in UHF right before he was in Seinfeld, so take that, Jerry. The late, great Kevin McCarthy, no, not that Kevin McCarthy, plays the evil cable cowboy R.J. Fletcher, and it's one of the most fabulously hammy performances I've ever seen. Fran Drescher, also known as the Nanny, was cast as Pamela Finkelstein, and she steals every scene she's in. She's brilliant. Anthony Geary of General Hospital is Philo, the station engineer and resident mad scientist. Victoria Jackson played Terry Campbell, and what I love about her is she is the only truly normal person in this entire film. It's like everyone else is crazy and she's the only sane one, and the only thing she does in the entire movie to make you question that sanity is taking George back at the end of the film. She plays the whole thing just completely straight, and something about that really adds to the comedy of the film as a whole. David Bowe plays George's best friend Bob Steckler, and my favorite bit of trivia about this is that a lot of people tend to get confused at first and think David Bowie is in this film. He's not. We saw more than enough of him in Labyrinth. But I love the idea that somewhere out there, there's probably a David Bowie fan who went to the theater to see this movie expecting to see David Bowie, and they got the Wheel of Fish instead.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
What I also love about the supporting cast of UHF is that it's filled with offbeat and vaudevillian comedy performers. I love offbeat comedy, I love surrealist humor, so it's always great to see people who specialize in that featured in more mainstream media. We have my beloved Emo Phillips, who I will be giving his own video here at some point because no one talks about Emo Phillips as much as they should, playing the shop teacher, Joe Early. This iconic scene was one of the few points of contention between the production crew and the distributors. They wanted the scene cut so that they could avoid a PG-13 rating, because traditionally films that are rated PG tend to do better in theaters than films that are rated PG-13. I don't know if this is still the case, but it definitely was in the 80s. Al said, absolutely not, that's Emo Phillips, we're not cutting him, we'll take the hit. And they did, and it was worth it. One of my favorite other little bits of trivia here is that, like a lot of other characters in this movie, Joe Early was named after a childhood friend of Al's. And according to Emo, they actually sat next to each other at Al's wedding. Can you imagine you're sitting next to Emo Phillips at a wedding? Like, just imagine that, first of all. But not only that, he plays a guy named after you in a movie being made by the guy who's getting married. And that version of you cuts his fingers off and bleeds all over the guy who's getting married. Phenomenal. Getty Watanabe plays Cooney, and he should be familiar to anyone who watches a lot of 80s comedy films. He's best known for playing, oh god, I don't even want to say this, Long Duck Dong in 16 Candles, but he's been in a bunch of things. I'm going to cover Watanabe in a later segment of this video. This isn't really the place for it. But we are going to discuss it as best as my limited view will allow. Billy Barty has a relatively minor role as cameraman Noodles McIntosh, but he's someone I wanted to mention because what a guy. He did a lot of bit part comedy acting, but he was also in Willow and Masters of the Universe and was a regular on the Spike Jonze Show. We love Billy Barty for his activism, founding Little People of America in 1957. It is still an active organization with over 7,500 members, and I think that deserves recognition. Vance Colvig Jr., credited as The Bum, is someone else who bears mentioning. He is one of many performers to have played Bozo the Clown, and what's cool about it is that his father, Pinto Colvig, also played Bozo. So, a generational character actor. We love to see it. John Paragon plays R.J. Fletcher's son and perpetual yes man, R.J. Fletcher Jr. He's best known for playing Jambi the Genie and Terry the Pterodactyl on Pee-wee's Playhouse. See how it's all connected in the world of surrealist comedy? Jay Levy is, of course, the director, but I want to mention that he plays Gandhi in the Gandhi 2 spoof sketch. According to him and Al, they could not find anyone who was the right, size and physical stature to play Gandhi, so Al just essentially annoyed him into taking the role, and I think that's really funny. The last cast member I really want to talk about is Trinidad Silva. Trinidad plays Raul Hernandez, host of Raul's Wild Kingdom. Before filming on UHF could finish, Silva was tragically struck and killed by a drunk driver. And he hadn't got to finish filming his part yet either, so they played around with the idea of recasting and reshooting his role, but obviously the emotional toll that would have taken was just too much for everyone. They didn't feel like that was the way to go, so they cut out the parts that they hadn't got to film and dedicated the film to Silva's memory. Just an awful tragedy. Listening to the commentary track really gives you a sense of how hard it hit the other members of the cast and the production crew. You can hear Al choking up when they get to Silva's parts on the commentary track. And look, I've got that good old neurodivergent justice sensitivity. So hearing something this awful and then hearing that it made Weird Al cry just made me want to fight someone. And I knew I was not going to be satisfied talking about this film and talking about like this part in particular without writing some sort of short PSA to throw into this segment. So this is your only warning before I go into after school special mode. Ready for a PSA break? Okay, here it comes. No, this isn't a joke segment. I wouldn't do that. This is actually quite serious. I'm just filming it this way because it felt weird having it as part of like the main video flow and I needed another little channel break segment. But this is not a joke segment. This is actually a really serious subject. I think one of the biggest misconceptions when we talk about drunk drivers is that they are all bad, evil, selfish people who deserve the death penalty. And I just don't think that's true. And I think when we talk about it that way, it makes it a lot harder for everyday people to see themselves as potential perpetrators. It's one of those tragedies that can be caused by literally anyone who makes one bad decision. And the biggest tragedy of it is that in this case, the person who makes the decision is the one most harmed by it. Because if you end up killing someone because of that bad decision, they're not going to feel the effects of it for very long. But their friends will, and their family will, and you will. The guy who killed Trinidad Silva only got 10 years in prison. And I think it's really easy to look at that and say, that's a miscarriage of justice, that's not long enough, that's horrible. And it's true. It's not long enough because nothing will ever be long enough. There's no way you can possibly repay the cost of an entire life. And because this is something that happens to and because of everyday people who made a bad decision, everyday people who can feel empathy and remorse and guilt, they have to live with that for the rest of their life. You have to live with this unpaid cost every day of your life, knowing that you will never be able to pay it back. So call an Uber or a Lyft, call a friend, have a designated driver. This really isn't a difficult concept, and yet we're still talking about it in the year 2025. And if you're new to drinking or using substances, by God, be smart and learn your limits. Experiment around trusted people who you trust to tell you that you've had too much and that you're about to make a bad decision. Recognize that there is no shame in saying that you need a little help and that it's a lot less embarrassing to say you're too drunk to drive than it is to realize that you've destroyed someone's life. After school special over, now back to our regularly scheduled programming. I mentioned in my video covering the Weird Al show that a few of the scenes that were cut from UHF were actually reworked for the show, and one of those was one of Trinidad Silva's cut scenes. The poodles that Raul yeets out the window were supposed to come back in the end and attack him, and they reused this idea for a scene in episode 11 where Uncle Ralphie gets attacked by poodles. As with any film, there were a lot of things that got cut from the final version.
Who in the world would ever want to see me do a love scene? Ugh. Just be thankful you didn't see that on the big screen. Hey, you want to see Stanley stick his hand in a meat grinder?
But there were even more things that weren't originally in the script that they threw in because Al would just say yes to everything. Like, there's all these little sight gags and throwaway bits that other people suggested. And from what I could gather from the DVD commentary, people would do something stupid off camera or mention a useless talent that they had. And Al would be like, oh, that's brilliant, we have to put that in the movie. Oh, that's so stupid, we have to put that in the movie. So things like Bob catching the grapes in his mouth, Stanley riding in on the little car. These were just random things that they thought would be funny, so they just threw them in at the last minute. And honestly, it's those little comedic details that really bring this movie to life. The film was scheduled to release in summer of 1989, and the next chapter of this movie's history is kind of legendary for how darkly funny it is. Orion Pictures didn't really expect the film to make a whole lot of money. Like, they expected it to succeed but not really be a big hit. But when they did the test screenings, audiences loved it and it tested extremely high. So everyone involved in the production got really excited and were really optimistic for how it would perform in theaters. They were talking about a sequel, they wanted to cast Al in more stuff, and then the blockbuster summer of '89 hit and they were just buried alive. It was a massacre. According to Box Office Mojo, UHF came in 19th out of 29 films released the summer of 1989. Other films released that summer included Tim Burton's Batman, otherwise known as the one with Jack Nicholson, Lethal Weapon 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Dead Poets Society, When Harry Met Sally, and Ghostbusters 2. So honestly, they never stood much of a chance. UHF also made about $6 million at the box office, and considering their budget was $5 million, that's not a great performance. This was, of course, a huge disappointment to everyone involved. Orion was really upset because they had been bleeding money for years and kind of expected UHF to, as Al put it, save the studio. So when it flopped, they weren't very happy about it. And for quite a long time, it made Al especially kind of second-guess the film and wonder what they did wrong and how they could have made it better. And I think that's sad because UHF is a great film. One of the things that Al said he regretted for quite a while was the story-based approach that they chose to take. The reason that farce films like Airplane are comedy classics is largely because what little plot there is ridiculous and doesn't take itself very seriously, which makes it hard to pick up on plot inconsistencies or mistakes because it's already all so very loose. So Al felt that if they had lessened the story approach that they took in UHF, maybe it could have done better and been more well received. See, the critics hated this movie, and one of the things they criticized the most was the story and the characters, which they said were weak, not fully fleshed out, and too goofy to be taken seriously. I don't put a lot of stock into what Roger Ebert has to say about a lot of things, but his review of UHF does sum up pretty well the way a lot of other critics felt about it. The movie alternates uneasily between the storyline, which involves the fate of the station, and a lot of self-contained parodies that do not share the same reality as the rest of the film. Yankovic's experience has been with parodies of the work of other artists. They have the inspiration, he finds the puns for their lyrics and sends up the visual look of their videos. His best comic distance is about 2 minutes. Hold me back. They said Al should have stuck to making short comedy sketches and parodies and not tried to do anything more than that. And so for years, Al said that he carried a lot of regret and dislike towards this film because he felt like he did a bad job with it. And if there's one thing I've learned from all the research I've done on this man and his projects, it's that Al is a perfectionist who holds himself to very high standards. As someone who struggles pretty badly with perfectionism myself, I know how hard that is to work really hard on something and feel like it still wasn't good enough. So I can only imagine how bad this must have felt. Especially when the critics specifically called out his performance because Al is not an actor. He doesn't have the edge and confidence he needs to carry a movie like this, and his physical presence is undermined by bad posture and an indistinct speaking voice. He needs to practice throwing back his shoulders and strutting. He creates a dispirited vacuum at the center of many scenes. You're a dispirited vacuum, Roger Ebert. Go watch My Dinner with Andre and shut up. As you can tell, I heavily disagree with the critical reception of this film. Comedy is very subjective, but I think categorizing UHF as routine, predictable, and dumb, real dumb, is very short-sighted and misses the heart of this film in the most shallow way. Comedy is often seen as a throwaway art, good for a laugh and that's about all, but I think comedy always has meaning, even if it isn't always overt or overreaching. I want to explore why UHF is a more meaningful film than people give it credit for, and why it's such a beloved cult classic today. And to get into the real substance of this movie, we have to discuss, of course, the film itself. But first, a short primer on American local access television programming, or PEG. One of the requirements of the Cable Communications Policy Act of 1984 was that cable operators had to set aside a certain number of stations for public, educational, and governmental use. These channels are often locally stationed and free to access, and cable operators have little to no say as to the content of these channels. Local access TV is usually used for things like town hall meetings or government broadcasts, as well as educational programming from local schools or colleges, but a lot of it is made by the general public, and because there's very little oversight, things can get really weird really fast. While there are rules about what you can and can't broadcast on public access, they aren't always enforced, and the standards regarding quality are usually pretty lax, if there are any quality control standards at all. And because PEG channels are made to be accessible to anyone, they allow anybody in the public to dip their toes into the world of broadcasting without the barrier of experience usually required in the wider industry. These publicly produced shows are often very low budget and sometimes stray into the realm of outsider art, being made by amateurs who need to fill time slots. Public access TV quickly developed a reputation for being outlandish, bizarre, and sometimes even kind of creepy. But in the era of streaming, where passion and authenticity are often sacrificed in pursuit of making purely profitable content, public access TV is remembered fondly by those with a penchant for the weird and wacky. And because there's often no advertising on public access channels, there's also no advertisers threatening to pull their support over content concerns. So people are able to say and create pretty much anything they want to, for better or for worse, because there's no larger company making money off of their airtime and giving them pennies in return for the work that they have created, as long as they adhere to a set of badly defined rules that their advertisers don't have to follow. And wait, no, don't cut the signal, please. I need my $2 from AdSense. So now we've talked about the production history of UHF, but the film itself is what we're really here to discuss. The plot of this movie is incredibly simple on the surface, but I'm going to go through it in a more detailed way so that I can talk about everything I want to talk about, and so that you're caught up when I talk about these details in depth a little further on in the video. I'm also just going to apologize in advance for the lack of a lot of things to look at and for just using a whole lot of screenshots here. I don't know what's going to trigger a copyright strike. I'm also sorry that this segment is basically just me commenting on and reacting to this movie. I promise I really do have some very sharp observations later on, but you're gonna have to sit through me talking about how cute Al is first. So, UHF from the very beginning. The opening credits scene has very little to do with the actual film, but it's worth mentioning because it's brilliant and because this film came out the same summer as Indiana Jones 3. It's a parody of Indiana Jones where Al steals an Oscar, or the facsimile of one anyway, because apparently they couldn't get the rights to use like the actual Oscar likeness, from a jungle temple, complete with an overlong segment of him running from a giant ball. He gets squished by the ball, and it's very gruesome and very symbolic of what eventually ended up happening to this film, I guess. The actual movie starts by introducing our hero George Newman and his friend Bob. And before I go any further, I need to tell y'all, the 35th anniversary DVD edition of this movie from Shout Factory came with this scratch and sniff smell-o-vision card that has timestamps that we will be using as we go through the film. And this is the first timestamp where we use it. It's Big Edna's Burgers, and give me a second here. And it smells like cat food. George and Bob get fired from their line cook jobs for insulting the manager of the restaurant, and I'm still not clear as to why Bob had to get fired. George is the one who was being rude. Have y'all noticed that this is like a pattern with characters that Al plays? He just plays these absolutely terrible people who drag everyone else down with him, with maybe the exception of Cheese Sandwich. We'll give Cheese a pass. George and Bob go back to Bob's apartment, which is attached to a karate studio run by our dear friend Cooney, which again, I'm going to get to a little later. Bob blames George for ruining his life, and George tries to cheer him up with a Twinkie Wiener sandwich. The Twinkie Wiener sandwich is pretty iconic in the Alverse. Like, my shirt even has a bunch of Twinkie Wiener sandwiches on it. And I decided a long time ago that if and when I made a video about UHF, I would make a Twinkie Wiener sandwich and eat it. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but it's too late to turn back now, so we're going to cut to an ill-advised cooking segment, and then we'll be right back. Hi, and welcome to Food Network. This is actually Food Network. You don't need to check the channel or anything. I promise it's Food Network. I'm your host, Abby, and this is my assistant, Katie. You gotta talk louder than that. Katie! This is my assistant, Katie. Katie has an apron because we're cooking today. I don't need an apron because I'm a professional chef.
Are you saying I'm not professional?
Okay, well today we are making a cultural staple, the Twinkie Wiener sandwich. Now, full disclosure, I have never had a Twinkie Wiener sandwich. I'm going to eat one for the first time live on not really national TV, whatever.
It could be national.
Whatever kind of TV this is. I'm gonna be eating one here, and hopefully it won't kill me. So,
I know the Heimlich maneuver, so if she starts dying, I guess.
yeah. Or, I mean, we could just leave me dying in, and then this video will get who knows how many views.
At least 2.
I mean, I could get featured on Wendigoon or Nexpo. Safety.
Wash your dishes. Always.
Okay, well, while Katie is over here being a square, we're going to introduce our ingredients. The Twinkie Wiener Sandwich has 3 ingredients. Twinkies, the wiener is in the pot back there, it's boiling, and you put them together and it makes a sandwich. Also, there's cheese whiz on the top.
Wiener in the pot with the water. Wiener in the pot with the water. Wiener in the pot with the water. Wiener in the pot with the water.
This is why we haven't been syndicated. Okay, so fun fact, when UHF was filmed, Al was actually not yet a vegetarian, so he's actually eating meat in the movie. However, because my kidney is stupid and doesn't work properly, I am a vegetarian, and I don't want to get sick. So I'm gonna be... Sorry. Are you quite finished?
Sorry.
Okay. As I was saying, because my kidney doesn't work, I am a vegetarian and I don't want to get sick. So I'm going to be cheating a little bit and using a plant-based hot dog.
You're cheating?
I am cheating, yes.
On Weird Al?
Another fun fact for you, I do not like Twinkies.
I've never had a Twinkie.
They're not good. I have never liked Twinkies. I'm not real excited about eating one right now. In fact, I think the Twinkie is probably going to be the worst part of this whole thing for me because I don't like Twinkies. All right, so we're going to do this the right way, the way that we have a close-up of in the film. We're going to take our knife.
The way that God intended.
That's right, the way that God intended. And we are going to very carefully, notice how I have a cutting board, but I'm not using the cutting board. I'm using the plate on top of the cutting board. Open up our Twinkie. There we go. That's nice and gross.
Ew.
And I'm going to cheat just a little bit more because this... Look at that. That is disgusting. All right, that's nasty. I am going to take a paper towel and just get like some of the excess cancer out of here. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Some of the excess nuclear waste out of
You're not actually gonna eat that.
this sponge cake. See, this is the awful thing about Twinkies is that like the sponge cake itself isn't that bad. It's got like, I know it's supposed to be a vanilla sponge cake, but it almost tastes kind of lemony, and I actually like the sponge cake part, but the cream or whatever this is inside is just, it's horrible, it's disgusting, and I don't want to eat it.
Hi, Mom. If you're watching this, we're drinking our green juice to offset whatever that is.
Healthy. Okay, we very carefully place the hot dog in the Twinkie, right? And then the finishing touch. I also feel like I should say when I went to the store to buy these ingredients, I had to ask someone where the cheese whiz was because I couldn't find it, and he took one look at the things in the shopping cart and just gave me the most knowing expression.
That smells
like he knew immediately the monstrosity that I was going to create with these ingredients. This is Kroger brand
goat cheese.
Kroger brand goat cheese.
Not goat cheese.
Yeah, not sponsored by Kroger. I wish I was sponsored by Kroger.
You want to be sponsored by Kroger?
Not really. Press tip firmly. Perfect. There you have it. A genuine Twinkie Wiener sandwich. I gotta really psych myself up for this. Now I have heard, I've read things online from people who have tried this in the past, and they all say it is not as bad as it looks. We are, however, going to cut it in half because
Take a look at that cross section.
if I can hold it properly, it's falling apart because Twinkies are disgusting. There you go.
But you gotta do like this.
That's it. What? Okay. We're gonna switch halves because this
We
one
have
seems to be
fancy glasses
staying
now.
together a little bit better. Okay. There we go.
Bone apple teeth.
All right. Bone apple teeth.
She's going through the 5 stages of grief right now.
Actually, it's not that bad. Like, I can confidently say I don't want to eat it again, but that's mostly because I don't like Twinkies. Like, the taste of the Twinkie is kind of superseding everything else right now, and because I just dislike Twinkies so much, it's making it hard to get through. If you're brave and you are okay with just totally disregarding your mental and physical health, I can confidently say this is safe to eat in small doses. Now I am going to wash my hands, chew a whole bunch of gum, and cut my tongue out, and I'll be right back. George goes home and tells his long-suffering girlfriend, Terry, that he got fired again, and she tells him that he needs to get it together. And look, I really feel for Terry. It's easy to be hard on her for staying with this loser for this long when she clearly has a good job and he's just there making a mashed potato mountain. But honestly, I'm really not the best person to judge her for it because I would put up with so much from this man. So anyway, George has this uncle, Uncle Harvey. Yes, like Harvey the Wonder Hamster, who's really into gambling, and he wins a local analog TV station called Local 62. Like, he just wins a whole ass TV station gambling. But he does not want to deal with managing this TV station. He's got important things to do. So with some prodding from his impeccably dressed wife, he makes George the manager. One of the things critics disliked about this film is that George is just made the manager of the station with no build-up or reasoning or logic behind it, and it's like, yeah? That's how spoof comedy works. Things happen for no reason to force the plot along because it's a spoof and it's funny. Shut up. So George goes to check out the station, and like any responsible partner, he brings Terry with him to this terrifying, semi-abandoned building in the middle of nowhere that looks like something out of a Saw movie. They meet Philo, the chief engineer, and he's a totally normal dude who isn't running a mad science lab in the middle of the TV station. Also, he lives there. Also, he hits George with 60,000 volts of electricity, which is the next trigger on our smell-o-vision card. See, it's these lightning bolts here. What do we got? Smells like paper with a little bit of burnt hair. The next day, George returns to the station with Bob in tow because he's dragged Bob into this mess now, and they introduce themselves to Fran, who desperately wants to be a newscaster but hasn't been promoted because they keep changing managers. While George is taking stock of the station's lineup, Fran tells him that the mailman accidentally delivered a package meant for RJ Fletcher, who runs Channel 8, a network affiliate. In the world of broadcasting, network affiliate stations are usually local stations that are contracted with the big networks, and so they can show the higher budget network shows, along with the higher budget network advertising. So Channel 8 is like the corporate big bad to Channel 62's underdog. Anyway, George decides to return the package himself because he has no sense of self-preservation. RJ Fletcher is a fantastic villain. He is so over-the-top, hammy, and like mustache-twirlingly evil. When we first meet him, he is gleefully insulting his team of yes men, which includes his son, and then he cruelly fires the janitor, Stanley Spadowski, for supposedly throwing away a report that was actually in front of him the whole time and then laughing about it. So he's not thrilled to see George, and he's a total ass to him. Speaking of being a total ass, one of his minions violently takes Stanley's mop away while he's trying to leave the building. And look, this is a big deal. That mop is like the MacGuffin of this movie, and I mean that in all seriousness. That mop matters. So George sees this guy being mistreated and is like, hey, why don't you come work for me? And Stanley is just beyond pumped about this. Also, the mop is our next smell-o-vision stop. Let's see, I'm actually kind of optimistic about this one. I feel like I shouldn't be, because like the picture is just a mop. Ooh. Ooh, I do really like that one. It smells like Windex. We cut away to Fran and Noodles McIntosh, and we find out that George has given her the newscaster job she always wanted. They're trying to do a news story, and they get viciously harassed by Channel 8's newscaster, who is none other than RJ Fletcher Jr. A quick aside here that I am going to touch on later, I like that this scene is cruel, but not necessarily funny. The guys from Channel 8 make a sexist remark to Fran and push Noodles around, but there's a surprising lack of the truly offensive or upsetting high school bully humor that was seen in a lot of movies from this time period, and especially comedy movies. It's made very clear that the way these two are being treated as outsiders and as marginalized outsiders in this industry isn't okay. And it isn't treated as a joke. In an era of comedy films where misogynistic and ableist humor was pretty par for the course, it's actually very refreshing to see that kind of thing not framed as being funny, especially in a film where everything else is so incredibly unserious. The tone is very different. It's bookended by jokes, but there are no jokes during the actual sequence. And something else I like is that they didn't show Noodles being assaulted. His camera cuts to static, and then it just shows him laying on the ground, which was probably a practical choice due to Billy Barty's real-life disability, but I think it was a good way to keep this moment serious and to keep it from turning into slapstick. I like that they kept this instance of bullying fairly somber, and it's something that I'm going to come back to later. After this scene, we get a nice bit of sketch comedy with my man, Emo Phillips. He plays a shop teacher who does a segment on woodworking and cuts off his thumb on a table saw. It's the kind of thing that would feel old and played out if performed by anyone else other than Emo Phillips. Then we get another cut to Spatula City, which was actually the first thing they filmed. Spatula City is iconic. The whole thing is up on YouTube. It's really easy to find, and it's a classic sketch. A lot of the movie going forward is cuts of sketch comedy. They're honestly really well timed, and I think they fit into the overall tone very well. They very accurately satirize low-budget TV, and I can see why a lot of critics said they were the best part of the film. I think the rest of the film genuinely is very good, obviously, but the sketches really are fantastic. Then it's time for Uncle Nutsy's Clubhouse, a kids show hosted by George Newman. Yikes, I'm getting flashbacks here. Oh god. Uncle Nutsy's Clubhouse is named after a feature in Mad Magazine that was a satire of hosted kids shows. So, we are through the looking glass here, people. Also, I need to say, this is one of my favorite Al costumes of all time, if not my favorite. It's so cute. I love this patchwork jacket. I love the bow tie. The hat is fantastic. I love everything about it. Al is just so adorable. My god. George is trying his very hardest with this. He even busts Bob in the face with a frying pan and makes him eat dog food, but these kids are just not having it. Honestly, I feel like this was dark foreshadowing for what would happen to Al in the late 90s. It is chilling how many similarities there are between this sequence and the Weird Al show. One more quick comment here because I wrote it in my notes. They went above and beyond on Bobo the Clown's makeup for this very short joke. It looks so good. The red on his face is even glittery. As someone who sometimes does drag, I just love how much work went into Bobo's face paint. Time for another smell-o-vision stop. Let's see, it's this one with the dog bone. I'm nervous. Oh my god. That one's actually really bad. It doesn't smell like dog food. Like, it just smells like bad. That one's not good. I did not enjoy that. We see Terry at her job. She's a dental hygienist. Oh god, there it is again! And she's trying to focus on a patient, but George is inviting her to dinner for her birthday over a news bulletin, and she is appropriately weirded out by this. Again, points to Terry for being the only sane person in this movie. Cut away to a sketch for Plots Are Us, and then to the Beverly Hillbillies. This is where they really take the surrealist comedy and crank it up to 11. George falls asleep watching the Beverly Hillbillies, and they show the entirety of the Beverly Hillbillies / Money for Nothing music video. It comes out of nowhere, it's so stupid, and by stupid, I of course mean hilarious. George and Bob work late into the night trying to figure out how to save the station because they're just bleeding money, and he ends up forgetting about Terry's birthday. Like, she gets all dressed up in her giant poofy sleeves, goes to the restaurant with her parents, and he doesn't even bother to call. And she's so over it that she finally decides she's had enough, and she breaks up with George. And it's like, Terry, I'm so proud of you, girl. He's like a drug, okay? He's like cocaine. You gotta say, look, the drug might be adorable, but it's bad for me, it's not doing me any favors, and I know it's really cute, but you just gotta say no more. You just gotta kick it to the curb. Unfortunately, George is already depressed because the station is failing, and he just feels like a failure all around, so he goes on to Uncle Nutsy's the next day and traumatizes some kids.
wanna go home.
Shut up, you little weasel.
He leaves in the middle of the show, and in a twist of fate, he randomly assigns Stanley to finish hosting. He then goes to the bar and tries to drink his sorrows away with a blueberry daiquiri. I specifically mentioned the blueberry daiquiri because I was going to make one to go with my Twinkie Wiener sandwich, but the ingredients were kind of expensive, and that's more than I'm willing to pay for a throwaway joke in a YouTube video. So instead, I got one of those, like those AHA drinks, like the bubbly drinks, that's like the two different flavors. It's like blueberry and strawberry, I think, and I have it here, and I am going to drink it out of Owl's head, because I feel like that's just something I should do. So, cheers. Pretty good. I'm also going to take another hit of smell-o-vision. Let's see. Oh, and this one's easy. I'm expecting it's gonna smell like blueberry. It doesn't. Actually, it doesn't really smell like much of anything. It's got like the faintest hint of blueberry, but I don't even know if it's that or if it's the AHA I just drank. Okay, well, I expected more from that. Back to the movie. While George and Bob are commiserating at the bar, they happen to catch the end of Uncle Nutsy's clubhouse, now helmed by Stanley Spadowski. And for some reason, everyone is just enthralled with Stanley. The kids love him, the bar patrons love him, and you gotta admit, he does have that certain charm. A lot of this scene was improvised by Michael Richards, which is why I think it flows so naturally and is so authentically strange. And at the end of the show, Stanley gives Winston Churchill a run for his money with the speech that launched 1,000 Swiffers.
You gotta run to a window and say, "Hey, these floors are dirty as hell, and I'm not gonna take it anymore."
So they run back to the station and make Stanley Spadowski the permanent host of the kids' show. With his confidence renewed, George starts putting his other ideas into action, and this is where the sketch comedy really picks up. The Wheel of Fish is iconic. I actually have this little Wheel of Fish pin that my best internet friend gave me, and it actually spins. I am obsessed with it. Also, it's another smell-o-vision stop, and that makes me really anxious. Okay, here we go. The Wheel of Fish. Wait, actually, hold up. Okay, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually really like the Wheel of Fish. It smells like a nice, like oceany cologne. You know those colognes that are like ocean themed and they have names like Captain or Starboard or Sea Wolf? Yeah, it smells like that. I like it. It's good. The Wheel of Fish gives us more of Cooney, and I feel like this is a good spot to talk about that a little bit because I feel like I would be greatly remiss if I didn't bring it up. So first off, and this may come as a great shock to you, but I am not Asian. I don't get to say what is or isn't offensive because I'm not a part of the group being stereotyped. I'm approaching this from my very limited view as a white person who watches a lot of comedy and a lot of very dated comedy. Getty Watanabe has actually been in quite a few things, and he usually plays a heavily stereotypical Asian character. Like I said before, his first big role was in 16 Candles, where he played foreign exchange student Long Duck Dong. Look, I make no secret of the fact that I think 16 Candles is one of the worst popular 80s films. I am a huge John Hughes fan. I love John Hughes, but this is his worst movie. I hate this movie so much, and this character is just one reason why. In his graphic memoir, American-Born Chinese, Chinese-American cartoonist Jean Luen Yang does a great job breaking down why this character and the stereotype he embodied was so harmful, and he's not the only person to do so. Adrian Tomine also did a comic commentary on this character in the short comic The Donger and Me. This character and his portrayal have had a lasting impact on Asian representation in Western media, and not always in the best way. And Getty Watanabe has received some flack for that, largely because he plays a large number of these types of characters. Because he was an Asian actor in the 80s and there weren't a whole lot of options. When asked about Cooney's inclusion in the film, director Jay Levy said, "There were a number of things in the movie which probably would not go over quite as well in a more PC era. But at the time, we seem to have gotten away with it. In many respects, you have to look at UHF as being of a certain era. Certainly there are many things that I would have done differently had I been writing a movie like that in current times, and perhaps some of those jokes would be something we'd have to consider altering somehow. However, Getty himself followed that up with, "I kind of disagree with that. I think it's getting stronger for Asians, to be honest with you. What I felt then was that there weren't that many Asians that were really out there, that were getting jobs. I think now that they're getting more, they're trying to get the balance of what you can do comedically and what you can do seriously. There's always going to be people that get offended, and I think what really is the problem is not so much the character, it's that there isn't enough. It's like what happened with 16 Candles, which is that there wasn't anybody else out there doing any kind of serious counter to show we're not really all like that. The balance of representation wasn't out there. I always had reservations. Always, of everything I did in the 80s, I had reservations. But I think I went to do it because I felt like I wanted to see if I could make something out of it. I was hoping that, if anything, maybe all those things in the 80s did open doors and that people were asking questions. Now, to be clear, Cooney is not near as bad as Long Duck Dong. First of all, Cooney is named after someone Al knew in real life, so he doesn't have a gross anachronism of an Asian name. He doesn't make sexist remarks towards women. In fact, the only stereotypical thing Cooney really does is practice karate and speak in an exaggerated accent. I'm not saying that's okay. Again, it's not for me to decide. I'm just saying that this is not the overtly negative portrayal of an Asian person that we see in a lot of other films from this era. It certainly could have been a lot worse. And, just to be clear, I'm not defending the potentially racist humor. I'm defending Getty Watanabe because I don't think he deserves a lot of the flack that he gets from particularly well-meaning white people for the characters he played as a marginalized person in the 80s and 90s. I don't think it's up to us to tell an Asian American actor who they are and are not allowed to play. That's not being a good ally. It's up to the Asian American community. And if anyone from that community wants to sound off in the comments and tell me what you think and what your thoughts are about Cooney in particular, because this is still a UHF video, I would genuinely love to hear what you have to say. Okay, back to the movie. After Wheel of Fish, we cut to Mysteries of the Universe with Philo, where we learned how to make plutonium out of common household items. Or we would if it hadn't been cut for time. Then it's off to Raoul's Wild Kingdom, where Trinidad Silva gives such a great performance, throwing poodles out the window with wild abandon. Also, I forgot to mention it before, but George starts wearing Hawaiian shirts right before the Wheel of Fish. Before that, he hadn't been wearing any Hawaiian shirts, but he finally starts wearing them when U-62 picks up steam and he's able to implement all of his wacky ideas. And that is some top-notch cinematic symbolism right there. George calls Terry and begs her to take him back, but he does so by just screaming like a madman.
Come on, Terry! Terry! Oh! I'm in hell! I'm in hell! Terry! Terry, pick up the phone! Pick up the phone! Pick up the phone! Oh! Oh, Terry! Oh, please! Oh, Terry!
Stay strong, Terry. I feel like there's a really good pun in here that I could make about, like, Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can't quite put it into words. Like, I can hear it, it's there, but I can't, like, I can't verbalize it. Anyway, Terry is a stronger woman than me, and she does not pick up the phone. Meanwhile, RJ Fletcher is losing his marbles because Channel 62 is dominating the ratings. Things are really heating up. There's a nice little montage of silliness from Stanley, and there's an instrumental track that plays in the background here that I just adore. It's called Fun Zone. It's included on the UHF soundtrack. I don't know what it is about this song, but it's really well done and I really like it. My girl Terry comes home to discover her apartment is just filled with nonsense courtesy of George, and she's weirdly impressed by it. And honestly, this does look pretty pricey. Like, George is clearly making bank down at the station, even if he is emotionally unstable. Time for smell-o-vision! It's a picture of some roses. I have no idea what this might smell like. Ooh. Oh, that's actually kind of nice. I don't usually like florals. I am terribly allergic to them. But I like rose. It's, you know, it's kind of a quiet floral scent. It's nice and subtle. That's a good rose scent. Back at the station, George and Bob are working on the programming schedule, and this is one of the best sight gags in any film. There is so much to look at here. I love how Buddha Knows Best and The Flying Pope are specifically on Sunday. I think my favorites are Beat the Loan Shark, The Young and the Dyslexic, and The Wide World of Tractor Pulls. Also, Volcano Worshippers Hour. The Volcano Worshippers are like a running Weird Al gag. He claims that when he was in high school, he had a club called the Volcano Worshippers Club, and that he only had this club just so he could get his picture in the yearbook. So anyway, while George is working on the schedule, Bob is reading the ratings, and he discovers that, wonder of wonders, U62 is #1 in the ratings. They have beaten the networks. This is a triumph of epic proportions. And even more importantly, one of my favorite Al shirts makes an appearance. RJ Fletcher and Channel 8 are not happy. Their sponsors are leaving, they are losing ad revenue. Oh, speaking of ad revenue, Fletcher isn't taking this outrage sitting down, and he's going to do something about it. Meanwhile, Uncle Harvey owes his bookie, Big Louie, $75,000 because he sucks at picking racehorses. But the good news is that Fletcher has offered to buy U62 for $75,000. So he shows up at U62 to brag about buying them out, and Bob is like, wait, isn't it illegal to own 2 television stations in the same town? Gotcha, Fletcher. This is an actual thing. Well, more or less. Our dear old friends, the Federal Communications Commission, actually does restrict the number of stations that a local network affiliate can operate to prevent potential monopolies. There are plenty of loopholes because of course there are. This is America. But for the purposes of the film, this is actually accurate. Unfortunately, they give Fletcher too much credit and he's just like, okay, fine, I'll just shut the station down and bulldoze it, I don't care. Uncle Harvey leaves to close the deal with Fletcher, but before he can make his escape, George calls his aunt and tattles on him. And our girl Esther Bilchick is not going to let him do this without a fight. So she and George convince Uncle Harvey to let George attempt to match Fletcher's offer. So now our plucky heroes at Channel 62 have to scrape together $75,000 in 2 days to save the station. Also, Chief Engineer Philo installs a camera in Fletcher's office because they rightly don't trust him. There's another smell-o-vision stop here during the Town Talk segment. It's Al Capone's glove compartment. Oh, that is really strong. Like, it's not bad, it's strong. I think it's supposed to be like those car air fresheners, like those trees, little pine trees that you put in your car. Yeah, it's not bad. Back at U62, our heroes come up with a brilliant plan to host a telethon to save the station. But the way they raise the money is actually pretty cool. They sell shares of the station's stock. 7,500 shares at $10 a piece, so that everyone who buys one and therefore supports the station becomes a partial owner. This is something I'm going to touch on later, so put a pin in that. Of course, Fletcher is not going to take this outrage sitting down, so he gets his minions to kidnap Stanley Spadowski, since he's the big draw and the one pulling in all the money. So Stanley vanishes, no one knows where he is, and now the telethon is failing because all they have is guys sitting upside down and yodeling while playing guitar. Now, a couple of times throughout the film, we see this guy, played by Vance Colvig Jr., asking people for change. He asks George for some change at the very beginning of the film, and the gag is that he actually just makes change for him. Like, George gives him a bunch of coins that add up to $1, and the bum character just gives him back a dollar bill. So he's introduced as sort of a throwaway gag, albeit a good one. And at this point in the film, the bum asks Fletcher for some change. And Fletcher, being a mustache-twirling cartoon villain, gives him a penny, the ultimate insult. And he's really pumped about this penny. It won't be the last time we see him. Terry, who has been following the station's desperate plight, goes to Channel 8 headquarters to try and reason with Fletcher, and it just makes him really mad. He insults not only U62, but the entire town for watching U62. Meanwhile, Stanley is driving his captors just absolutely up the wall. And when they go to tell him to shut up, he sees something in the corner behind them. Could it be? Yes, it's his mop. The one that was taken from him at the beginning of the film. They are reunited at long last. Seeing this mop inspires Stanley so much that he gains frankly superhuman abilities, and he makes one of the greatest escapes in film history. What I love about this escape scene is that Stanley acts pretty much how an average person would probably act in this situation. You know how escape scenes are always perfectly choreographed and the guy escaping has like an intricate knowledge of the floor plan of the building despite being blindfolded the whole time? Yeah, not Stanley. He's using the terrain to his advantage, like he's throwing stuff at the goon squad and trying to trip them up, but he's also falling all over the place and it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess, and it's very funny and also very believable. But despite his frankly Herculean efforts, Stanley is recaptured and Philo sees it all on his hidden camera and goes to tell George. And here we get the best action sequence from any film to date. George goes flying out the station and just takes off, and honestly, something about watching Al run is so funny to me. He runs like a 12-year-old who just heard his microwave pizza pockets go off. And then we get this remarkable transformation, and George literally turns into Rambo and ransacks Channel 8 to rescue Stanley. And also Channel 8 is now a military base. This entire scene could have been one of those things that really dated the film, but I actually think it's one of the best parts of the movie, because instead of focusing on just making it a parody of Rambo, it becomes more a satire of all hyper-masculine action films. He walks really slowly toward a guy with a machine gun and never gets hit once, even when standing perfectly still. He runs right through everyone's sightline, but is somehow never seen. He just shoots everything and blows stuff up for absolutely no reason at all. He catches a bullet in his teeth, eats it, and then shoots multiple rounds back out of his mouth. It's fantastic. I think my favorite part is how purposefully awful the bodysuit looks. Like, Al's face is just as thin as it ever was, but it's now attached to this foam rubber bodybuilder base, and it's the funniest, most jarring visual gag. It's not even the same skin tone. Also, as a glasses wearer, I am amazed that his glasses are both intact and clean. I would be so blind by the end of this whole thing. Smell-o-vision time. Let's see, it's a picture of an explosion and it says boom. No idea what I'm getting myself into. Huh. It's nice, but I can't quite place it. It smells like I don't know, it smells like some sort of like air freshener or cleaner or something. It's probably supposed to be like a bonfire. It doesn't smell like that though. They escape in a helicopter, and fun fact, the guy selling helicopter rides was supposed to be played by Sylvester Stallone himself, but it just never happened, sadly. But Fletcher comes after them in his own helicopter, so they shoot him out of the sky. It's absolutely savage. Then they blow up a few more things just for fun, including the Hollywood sign, because if there's one thing we hate around here, it's subtlety. And with the exception of the random screaming from George and Stanley, the entire Rambo sequence is done without a single word of dialogue. It is so good. Except plot twist. George's overactive imagination strikes again. Stanley is still in peril, none of that ever happened, and George is still George. We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, so George bursts into Channel 8 for real, still high on his hypermasculine power fantasy.
Ah!
Who is this guy?
Have I ever mentioned what a brilliant satirist Weird Al is? Because this is gold, and is immediately caught. Lucky for us all, he's saved by Cooney and his karate students with a joke that I'm not sure I'm supposed to laugh at this joke anymore, but I still do. I can't help it. It's actually pretty clever. Please don't cancel me. They're hiding in the supply closet, and when they jump out, they yell,
Supplies!
See, I love this joke because it works on multiple levels. You don't have to laugh at the level that is slightly racist if you don't want to. So with the help of Cooney, George and Stanley triumphantly return to the station just in time for the end of the telethon, where Stanley gives another rousing speech and all the regular Joes and Janes are ready to revolt against the potato of injustice. Meanwhile, Fletcher is making a last-ditch effort to destroy our friends at U62 by going on the air and telling everyone how their lowbrow, low-budget broadcasting is single-handedly destroying the moral fiber of an entire community. But before he can get too far, good old Philo overrides the signal with a spy camera recording of Fletcher bad-mouthing the entire town. Channel 62 almost has enough to save the station, but time runs out and both Fletcher and Big Louie show up to shut down the station and possibly kill Uncle Harvey. Because Fletcher doesn't know when to quit, he gets up on the stage and just starts gloating. But we get one more plot twist when the bum shows up and wants to buy all the remaining shares for the last $2,000 they needed. You see, the penny that Fletcher gave the bum was actually a high-dollar collector's item that was worth a crap ton of money. Fletcher accidentally orchestrated his own downfall by throwing his hubris around and stepping on the little people. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. While Fletcher is continuing to wax poetic about his own importance up on stage, George gives the money to Big Louie and gets the deed to the station. They've won. The station belongs to the people, and it is very triumphant and weirdly sweet. But wait, it's not over. The FCC shows up and revokes Fletcher's broadcasting license. And not only that, but our man Noodles gets his revenge on Fletcher Jr. Philo goes back to his home planet. Oh yeah, Philo's an alien, by the way. George gives Stanley a trophy for being the best TV star and janitor in the world, and because Terry has no self-control and I cannot blame her one bit, she gets back together with George. But it's a parody of Gone with the Wind. One last smell-o-vision stop. All right, let's see what we got. Last one. Ooh, it's some type of cologne. It's not bad. You know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually think that the Wheel of Fish is my favorite of the scratch and sniffs. Like, that sounds so sacrilegious to say. That's just atrocious. Like, I can't believe I just said that, but like the Wheel of Fish actually smells pretty good. Yeah. Smell-o-vision final score. I think the Wheel of Fish was the best, and the one that was the dog treats that George feeds Bobo, by far the worst. And that's it. If you haven't seen UHF yet, now you can watch the rest of the video and still have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. Because now we get to analyze UHF and talk about why I think this film has endured as a cult classic and why people are so attached to this ridiculous movie. I want to make something clear right off the bat. This is not a deep film. I think this movie does have meaning. I think it has an emotional center and it has layers, but it's not like the deepest, most complicated movie ever made. With that being said, it does have meaning. And to fully understand that meaning, we need to understand a little bit more about Weird Al and his body of work, especially in the 1980s. Don't roll your eyes at me. If you've sat through this video for this long, you should have been expecting this. Like, this should not come as a surprise to you. Parody has never been considered highbrow. It's kind of always been seen as the low-hanging fruit of the comedy world, which is incredibly unfair. Satire and parody are different, but they have the same roots, and those roots go all the way back to the ancient Greek satirists. I mean, are we really gonna call a guy with a name like Aristophanes lowbrow? But for some reason nowadays, parody is just seen as being nothing more than low-budget, straight-to-video releases and bad YouTube music videos. The truth of the matter is that parodic humor and satirical humor are not worth less than other forms of comedy. In fact, they are the oldest and most important root of comedy. They let us hold a sort of funhouse mirror up to the world around us and view it through a less serious but often more critical lens. And that's where we come to Weird Al and what he was doing throughout the 80s. During his early career, Al did a lot of send-ups not only of pop culture, but of popular mindsets and society as a whole. His parodies were very focused on consumerism and the consumption of mindless entertainment. In 3D, released in 1984, is really the album that I would call the precursor to UHF. Songs like Midnight Star, Nature Trail to Hell, Mr. Popeye, and The Brady Bunch made fun of popular entertainment that had mass appeal that wasn't necessarily sophisticated. Tabloid news, gratuitous violence, useless consumerism, and mindless TV are things that have always been present in popular culture. People just like that stuff. But in the 80s, consumerism and pop culture were really influential on everyday life, especially in the US. So Al's irreverent satire of that popular mindset was pretty well received, even if it was being done in a medium that was usually denigrated. The difference between music and film, however, is that music is usually delivered without a narrative framework, and it allows the audience to parse out the meaning on their own. So while Al's music might have felt like a condemnation of mindless entertainment, UHF almost seems like a celebration of it. Think about it. In UHF, the more mindless and dumb the programming is, the more people tune in and the more enjoyment they seem to get out of it. We really see this in Stanley Spadowski's Clubhouse, where both kids and adults are in the audience having the time of their lives, even though it's all very nonsensical. It's almost like the nonsense and the pure fun without the expectation of anything heavier lets us go back to a simpler time when we were happy watching Tom and Jerry and weren't worried about tariffs tanking the economy. The same thing kind of happens with Raoul's Wild Kingdom, which is initially presented as a possibly educational show, but is just more mindless nonsense. The sketches and shorts throughout UHF are a send-up of local low-budget TV, sure, but they're also a celebration of the things we love the most about it. The unpredictability, the lack of regulation or oversight, the sheer chaos, these are the things that fascinate us about this period in broadcasting history. Not just because they're shocking or strange or funny, but because a lot of it was made by and for regular people. Local analog TV was almost like the earliest version of early golden age YouTube, where people just made things for fun and put it up online for other people to see without the expectation of perfection or profit. And that point about regular people is what I really want to focus on here. Because at its heart, UHF is really about the triumph of the everyman and a celebration of fun for fun's sake. Isn't it deeply ironic that I just used the phrase fun for fun's sake during an in-depth analysis of a spoof film? Satire really is everywhere. Going back to Weird Al for a moment before I go into this next point, one of the reasons Al is so beloved is because he makes art for and by the everyman. He started out writing comedy songs in college, he was a college radio DJ. Unlike a lot of other people in the industry today, he has a pretty good grip on what the average everyday person finds entertaining and connects to because he was that and in a lot of ways still is. While his work may have multiple layers, it's easily accessible on any layer you want to enjoy it on. Like, you can enjoy Dare to Be Stupid as a fun song about celebrating stupidity, or you can enjoy it as a double-edged pastiche and satire of Devo, which is already a satire. So there's like 4 layers of satire happening here if that's what you want to get out of it. His work is enjoyable on many different levels. And I think this is why a lot of the short sketches throughout the film are so memorable and were liked so much, even by the critics who disliked the rest of the movie. Laughing in bafflement at a bad C-tier movie or being inexplicably glued to a trashy late-night talk show is something that almost everyone can relate to. Bad TV is really something that kind of unites us all, and honestly, enjoying trashy entertainment is something that unites us all, whether we want to admit it or not. But while Al's work appeals to the everyman, it especially appeals to people who are a little bit outside of the norm. And I think it's this celebration of people that are a little bit odd that makes UHF a truly rare and heartfelt film. So in the beginning of this video, I talked about how a lot of the casting in this movie has a very sideshow or variety feel to it. And looking at this movie from the outside, you could get the impression that it's laughing at strange people or just people who are a little bit outside of the norm. Characters like Stanley, Fran, and Noodles could very easily become punchlines and become cruel punchlines. But they're not. If you remember during my commentary chapter, I talked a little bit about the scene with Fran and Noodles. And I want to go back to that because I think this scene in particular is very important in understanding this film's emotional center. Fran is a female TV newscaster with a nasal voice and an accent, and Noodles is a cameraman with dwarfism, so all his angles are tilted violently upward. Now, whether or not you find these two character jokes funny, they are jokes and they are written to be humorous. However, when the obviously privileged crew from Channel 8 shows up and starts pushing them around, the framing of the scene changes drastically. The music changes, the cuts slow down, it becomes very dramatic and very somber very quickly. As I mentioned before, we never see Fletcher Jr. assault Noodles. This might seem like a minor thing, but we need to remember that little people and disabled people in general have long been cast in roles that veered toward the realm of violent slapstick. And in a comedy film, any violence is going to be seen as slapstick comedy by the audience, whether it's meant to be seen that way or not, just by virtue of the genre that we're watching. So the deliberate decision to not only not show Noodles being assaulted, but to change the entire tone of that scene is very notable. Something similar happens with Stanley a little earlier in the film, right after he's fired. First of all, Stanley's introduction is also notable in and of itself because he's introduced as being a deeply sympathetic character. It happens right after the meeting where Fletcher is looking for a file and can't find it and tells his yes men that he thinks the janitor took it. So we already know the janitor is going to be a sympathetic victim in this situation. When Stanley is called in, we know that something is a little odd about him, but he isn't necessarily a punchline. He just seems like your usual dopey oddball character. Then Fletcher fires him and throws him out before we can learn anything else about him. And immediately afterwards, we find out that the file he was fired over was there the whole time and Fletcher is laughing about it. The next time we see Stanley, he's being accosted while leaving the building for taking his mop. The very first mop he got at 8 years old. And while this scene is a little lighter in tone due to Michael Richards' fantastic physical comedy, it still has the same feel to it that the scene with Fran and Noodles does. This is someone a little bit strange or initially off-putting who has very little power, and his mistreatment is portrayed as a stark negative rather than a punchline. You could make the same argument for the bum character. George gives him change at the beginning of the movie and does so in a way that isn't insulting. Fletcher gives him a single penny that comes back to bite him in the ass and ends up saving the day, not only for George, but also for the bum, who now owns 200 shares in U62 stock and a Rolex. UHF is, at its heart, a movie about weird people. But while the things they do are over the top and comedic, the people themselves are not the punchline. These are characters with dreams and aspirations who care about each other and don't fault one another for the quirks and differences that set them apart from the greater society symbolized by Channel 8. And the most wonderful thing about it is that the weirder and wilder and more authentically strange the programming on U62 becomes, the more the public connects with it and loves it. The public falling in love with Stanley really isn't as out of the realm of possibility as it seems, because we know that in a world of manufactured perfection, what people really crave is authenticity. And Stanley not only gives them that sense of childhood nostalgia, but his optimism and strangeness comes across as authentic and enjoyable because it is. UHF is a weird movie, but it's authentically weird. It never feels manufactured or forced because it largely isn't. It's just weird people doing weird things and other people watching them do weird things. It's kind of meta in that way. And I think it's that commitment to weirdness and authenticity that made it such a cult classic. Media connects with different people for different reasons. And Al's core audience of diehard fans are exactly the type of people this movie is for and about. Weird people who are entertained by weird things while appreciating the value inherent in the weirdness. I think Jay Levy said it best when he said, "The perennial 12-year-old in us is the Weird Al audience." Mindless entertainment is rarely ever truly mindless. If it connects people and brings them joy for whatever reason, then it has value. And clearly this film brought a lot of people a lot of joy. Oh boy, that was a long video, but congratulations, you reached the end. As some of you may know, my house actually flooded halfway through the making of this video, which meant I had to stop for about a month or so. And during that time, somehow the original outro that I had filmed got totally erased from my computer, from my Google Drive, from my phone. I have looked through every single file I have, and I cannot find it. But that's okay, I wasn't really saying anything interesting or important anyway. I don't even remember what I said, which probably goes to show how unimportant that outro actually was. So I'm just filming this instead, gonna stick it in there and call it good. And really, I don't have a whole lot more to say than what I've already said in the video. I think this is a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I think Al and Jay and everyone else involved really has a lot to be proud of. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment. It really helps me out. If you can't think of anything to say, just tell me what your favorite Weird Al song is. Or suggest a video for me to do, or something along those lines. I don't really care. If you're new to my channel, Welcome! I usually just kind of post whatever I feel like talking about or whatever I'm interested in researching at the moment, but it's usually some variation of retro media analysis, kind of like this video was. I plan to talk about a lot of 80s and early 90s stuff, but I'll talk really about anything I find interesting. I do talk a lot about Weird Al, so if you're an Al fan, you'll feel right at home. If you made it this far, I'll give you a sneak peek into my next big video where I'm going to be celebrating Eurovision season, which is coming up this month, and I'm really excited about it. We're going to be celebrating Eurovision this year by talking about satire at Eurovision. We're going to be looking at some of my favorite satirical acts. We're going to talk about some of the history of comedy and novelty songs at Eurovision. And we're also going to talk about why I think the term joke entry is ridiculous and should no longer be used. It's going to be a really fun video. I'm really looking forward to it. If you like comedy, satire, and especially Eurovision, this is one you're not going to want to miss. Anyway, thank you all again so much for watching. This video was really hard to make, not least of all because, as I said, my house flooded halfway through. So I really appreciate the patience and the encouragement and the support from all of you while all that was going on. I had a lot of fun with this video. I hope y'all enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it, and I will see you in the next one. Here's my cat.